Michigan had a great scheme coming into that game. They operated it. They did everything possible to impress every recruit there. And it really was, from the recruits that I've talked to, it really wasn't just the game. It was the atmosphere, the post-game incredible atmosphere that they're going to remember for a long time.
All right, welcome in. Who got next? I'm Dennis Fithian, joined by the recruiting editor here at the Maize and Blue Review, Brandon Justice, and recruiting analyst Tanner Wooten. And we're all here ready to get things underway. And, you know, guys, it's been a great week. It's always a great time to talk about recruiting, but it's a great time to talk about recruiting right now.
Yeah, I mean, hey, what a week, right? Anytime you win a game of that magnitude on the field, it's going to have probably even larger and longer lasting effects off of it. So, you know, Michigan gets bragging rights with the rivalry for a year, but it also gets bragging rights inside recruits' homes and on the phone, and it gets a lot of advantages over the next year. Obviously, if they are able to win this weekend, even more so. We'll see how long Michigan can take this thing. Everything is right in front of them, and that's separate from recruiting. But if they're able to pull this thing off and make it the distance, maybe not win this thing, but if they can make it the distance, they're doing themselves a service that they have not been able to do in Harbaugh's 7 years. So talk about a monumental weekend.
I should say that was Adam Gorney from Rivals, the national recruiting director. I talked with him earlier today. I asked him if this was going to be something that is going to have more of an impact with this class right here or next year down the line. And he said probably in 2023. Tanner, we've only got 2 weeks to go. So I don't know how much, that you could plant that seed. It's not going to bear fruit maybe in 2 weeks, but would you agree that it would be more next year and down the line?
Yeah, I think obviously recruiting is so relationship heavy that one win 2 weeks from signing day isn't going to maybe swing the pendulum that much for recruits who are maybe waiting to see what Michigan did. And I think we heard that a lot all season and all off season. Hey, love the relationships with Michigan, love the recruiters on the staff. How are they going to respond in 2021? 11-1 potential Big Ten championship. I just don't think there's enough time to kind of build on that in 2022. But over the next year, you can walk in there and say, hey, we beat Ohio State. We have a Big Ten championship ring. We have a playoff berth. We have all the academics, everything else that comes with Michigan. I think 2023 is when it's going to pop off.
Well, the other thing, not only the monumental win for Michigan, getting the monkey off their back, they win the Thanksgiving weekend nationally. Everybody's talking about that game, but now you've got the crazy coaching carousel going on here, and the big one is that it seems like it's going to affect Michigan the most is Notre Dame with Brian Kelly going to LSU. And Brandon, are you zeroing in there? First thing I did was look at their class and say, oh, yeah, hey, there's two guys. There's a kid from Traverse City. There's a kid from Grand Rapids. And they're both 4 stars. They would look good in this Michigan class. I'm sure everybody's doing that. What's your feel about Michigan being able to go in there while there's uncertainty and maybe rock Notre Dame's world?
Yeah, hey, we'll see what those guys end up doing. If they're going to sign in the early period, then I think Tanner makes a great point that those relationships have really already been built. Obviously, with BK leaving Notre Dame, the relationship at the head of it all has fallen off. But more times than not, a recruit is committing to a school not just because of its head coach, but because of the relationships they have with the assistant coaches, whether it's a corner who's committing and has a good relationship with not only the quarterback's coach, but maybe even the director of personnel. So really it's deeper than just the head coach. So I think with Notre Dame and in the cases of those guys, I think, yeah, Michigan's probably making a phone call, but in the case of these 22s, if they're deciding to sign in the early signing day, more time, it's going to be hard to pry those guys away just because of the relationships they've built. Now, if BK cleans house at Notre Dame and the majority of those guys go down to LSU, to the Bayou, then, you're talking about a different story. But at this stage of the game, like Amarian Walker, who's been committed to Notre Dame for a while, 4-star wide receiver, is a kid I'd keep an eye on just because he's flirted with Michigan quite a bit as is. So, that's a kid who has a little bit more to it, I think. I think there are others. I just think that Amarian Walker is really the one to look out for. But, yeah, you talk about the coaching carousel. This is as crazy as we've seen of a weekend after a weekday after the last weekend of college football that we've seen. This is as crazy as it gets. You're talking 2 days after the final whistle. So it's just been chaotic. And meanwhile, Jim Harbaugh's feet are kicked up on the seat. He's preparing for a Big Ten championship, and it's a lack of worries around here, which has not been the case. You talk about a year ago, but even 3 years ago, and everything in between there, it's just been questioning the program. And right now it's in as pretty as a spot as any school in the country, especially in comparison to the Notre Dames and the USCs and the Oklahomas and LSUs, who are all just changing the entire thing.
Do we root for one, like you're talking about cleaning house? This Marcus Freeman, I would think the defensive coordinator would be a candidate, of course. I don't know, Luke Fickell, Cincinnati, maybe he goes. Freeman goes to Cincy. Matt Campbell goes in there. Is that a wild card where then he's going to bring most of his staff, and then you would have a cleaning, and then maybe that's more of a chance to be able to poach some of these guys? So what do you think?
I mean, I think if you're going to rank those three, as far as if you're a Michigan fan, who's going to be, as far as recruiting goes, I think Marcus Freeman's probably going to recruit the best out of those three as a head coach. I think that just the pull that he has with these young guys speaks volumes. And head coaches, like I said, head coaches traditionally are not the guys leading the way. We've talked about this before, Dennis. Typically those are just the head coaches are the guys closing it out. So when it's time to make the deal happen, that's when the closers will come in, and those are the head coaches. And I think that's kind of what happened with Harbaugh and a kid like Rolder, who was probably sold either way. But Harbaugh came in and closed that one, and that's what got him to commit when he did. And the same thing can be said with the bigger guys he's gotten along the way, like the Rashawn Garys and the Devin Bushes and what have you. So I think that Marcus Freeman is a guy who's going to give you the highest amount of effort recruiting out of head coaches. Some head coaches really just let their staff do the work, and then they just come in and clean up shop when it's needed, right? I think Freeman's a guy who's going to give you the highest effort. I think Fickell and Campbell are good, but if I had to rank them, I'd probably put Freeman and Fickell on a pedestal much higher than I'd put Campbell from a recruiting perspective, just because Campbell doesn't have experience recruiting to this degree or this pedigree in this area. I think he's at Toledo. He obviously recruited extremely well. He knows the Midwest very well. He's going to recruit the Midwest well, and I think he's going to develop well. I just don't, and excuse me, again, Acuna loves to come around during the show. But I just don't picture him being a guy that's going to come in and threaten, at least in the time now, to the level that a guy like Fickell and a guy like Freeman will, who both have experience at high Division I Power 5 programs, recruiting these kind of guys, the 4 stars, the 5 stars of the Midwest.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. Yeah, I think Marcus Freeman has the lowest floor as a head coach compared to those guys, but maybe the highest ceiling, just like you said, Brandon, the potential as a recruiter. And we've seen him be big time at Cincinnati and now Notre Dame. I think with Campbell, it's a bit more of a toss-up, right? Iowa State coming to Notre Dame is much different, right? There's a lot of pull to Notre Dame, but there's also, we saw it with Rich Rodriguez coming to Michigan, try to continue to recruit the same kind of guy, and it did not work out, right? So I think Luke Fickell is that kind of that middle ground. That would be a slam dunk. I know his faith has been talked about a lot. I think Cincinnati, for him to be able to go to Notre Dame and still recruit the state of Ohio well would be a big thorn in the side of Ohio State. Like, I would really be curious to see that dynamic play out. I really think Luke Fickell at Notre Dame is probably the best case scenario for Michigan fans. He's a tough-nosed kind of guy, and, as we saw on Saturday, that's kind of what Ohio State needs if Brian Day were to go to the NFL or anything like that. So I think him at Notre Dame is probably the best option for Michigan fans.
That sounds good. I felt like if we look at the best scenario for Michigan leading up to the early signing day, which, tomorrow is December 1st, so we're 2 weeks away then from the early signing period. Michigan's sitting there at 18, at least how Rivals is looking at their team rankings. What's the best case scenario? I was thinking that, a friend told me today, like, Michigan just got a 5-star wide receiver commitment. I was like, what? He said, yeah, Ronnie Bell, coming back. And I was like, okay, I'll buy that. I'd rather have Ronnie Bell coming back than, maybe a 4 or 5-star commitment. But what do you guys think the best case scenario here for Michigan is just in this 2021 recruiting class? Can they get up into the top 15? How high could they go? What's the best case scenario?
Yeah, I think they can get into the top 15. Absolutely. I don't know about the top 10. I think Tanner made a really good point in the beginning of the show. I mean, yes, this is a monumental victory. Yes, this recruiting weekend was awesome, but the lone commitment we've seen so far was from a 2023, and I think that speaks volumes to what's going to occur, is that Michigan's going to get a lot of momentum with that 23 class. They had a lot of 23s and 24s and a few 25s who are legit prospects that were on scene for that game. I wrote about AJ Hoffler today, a 2023 4-star out of Georgia, who was a no doubt Buckeye. Ohio State was his leader publicly and all of that. And he said in the interview that Michigan had closed the gap with that win, and that this was Harbaugh was kind of being held back and suffering a lot of scrutiny because of his lack of wins. And then this year he really flipped the script on everything. And so coming from a kid who's a 2023 from Georgia who wasn't at the game, I mean, this kid watched from his TV at home. That's how apparent that game was to him. So let alone the kids who were actually there at the game, on the tours, on the visits, with the staff, seeing it all culminate. Because they all got there either right the day before Thanksgiving or the day after. So they spent more than just that game day around these guys. So to see them throughout the week and then seeing it all culminate into what it did on Saturday, it means a lot to these recruits. That's the perfect scenario for Michigan. And it sounds elementary, but Michigan did everything it could. And there's going to be some kids that they're going to land in this class, and there's going to be some kids that they strike out on. But what I can say with complete confidence, and what I probably couldn't have said with complete confidence from 2018, 2019, is that Michigan's done its due diligence. They've done everything they could possibly do this year. They've recruited their tails off. The staff has really outdone itself on the trail. And then when it comes to its biggest visiting weekend, Ohio State, you talk about absolutely crushing it. I mean, Michigan's who they've hired within their recruiting operations on campus, like Courtney Morgan and those surrounding him and those recruiting operations folks, especially the woman involved as well. There's, I think, about 3 of them who are really at that head front there. They've done a terrific job with these guys. So you mix that in with how impressive that gameplay was. I mean, they crushed it this weekend. So again, Michigan's going to land some kids in this class. They're going to strike out on some kids, but they've put on the best show possible for them.
The best show that could still happen here. You think about if they beat Iowa, and they're supposed to. I mean, they're a double-digit favorite here.
Right.
You get the rest of the month where you're top of mind everywhere, every hit. Of course, around here, everybody's talking about it, but you're just national news. Hey, what's Michigan? College football playoff, New Year's Eve. It's just, Michigan, they haven't been in this situation for so long. I know they've never been to Indy, but then, to have the rest of the month, I mean, who really knows? I mean, they weren't all that far off the radar anyways. Now they're right in there, just what it could mean for them.
I would say too, and I don't know any guys off the top of my head, and Brandon, maybe you might have some that come to mind, but I think, even though I mentioned the relationship aspect of 2022, there may still be a guy or two that Michigan can kind of just call and say, hey, what'd you think, right? And maybe get back into it, especially with the uncertainty. I mean, this is like NCAA 14 type coaching carousel, man. Everybody's leaving and jobs are popping up, and there's going to be a lot of movement from assistants all the way to head coaches across every conference in the country. So I think for Michigan, relationships are extremely important. There is potentially an opportunity for certain guys to call up and say, hey, we're 12-1 Big Ten champs, assuming they beat Iowa, right? But say, hey, what do you think? And maybe flip a guy or two or get somebody who's out there that we haven't thought of yet. I feel like Michigan sometimes, gets a guy or two that kind of comes out of left field, and maybe they were working it in the background. So maybe that'll happen this year, but I don't think there's any slam dunks, but it wouldn't surprise me to see this win still pay off in this class, even if it's just one guy.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, you talk about Michigan taking flyers late in the cycle. There is another signing day, right? So we still have the traditional February 2nd signing day that's going to come, and it's not going to be – it's going to be what it has been the past few years, just kind of there, and Michigan might get a guy or two. They usually don't, but that could still happen. And the point I'm trying to make is you talk about flyers and you talk about late guys who Michigan pick up, like, oh, okay, they're going to take this. Ronnie Bell rings a bell, right? I mean, he's a kid who was committed to Missouri State for basketball, and then out of nowhere, Michigan's like, hey, you want to play wide receiver? And all of a sudden we got this kid committed, and we're all wondering who is this and what are we looking at here? And now we're sitting here. Michigan's fan base is electric over him coming back to play his 5th year after the torn ACL this year. So, I mean, he had like all Big Ten wide receiver, potential this year. That was widely thought. Obviously he was not getting first team because Ohio State's receivers exist. But either way, he had that, that ceiling, and maybe next year can be that guy. But either way, he's a guy that kind of comes to mind there. Not saying they're going to go out there and get the next Ronnie Bell, but I'm saying that they could get. There's kids there. There's thousands and thousands of kids that play high school football out there for Michigan to find between not just now in 2 weeks, but now in February if they need to fill a need.
Yeah, and they've done a pretty good job there. I think about Rod Moore, who's played this year, and just how he wasn't in for spring. I wasn't thinking that he was going to. Nobody was talking about him hitting the field and contributing this year. And they did get. I think maybe this would be the thing when you talk about February the 2nd. It's like Rayshon Benny. He was committed to Michigan State, and then he slid past that 72-hour window. And maybe that's going to be the thing to look at, because somebody's asking about these Notre Dame. We asked, we already talked about that, Antoine, the Notre Dame recruits. But if Burnham and Ziegler from Grand Rapids, if these guys don't sign up coming up in 2 weeks and they're waiting to the next signing period, then it's a lot more in play, obviously, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, if they're not going to put pen to paper, then all is fair, right? That's kind of how it goes. I mean, it's a cutthroat business. We've seen that firsthand over the past 24 hours. Look at what the coaches have done. Brian Kelly had a meeting for 2 minutes, walked out, put up a peace sign, and said, go Tigers. That was it for him. So you think about as simple as that. I mean, if Brian Kelly can do that, then heck, Michigan can call up whomever they'd like, right? And look, it's recruiting. If Michigan's going to call up a Notre Dame kid like, hey, your coach left you in the dark, and we're sitting right here with a win away from a college football playoff. We're in a successful conference. You don't have to worry about, squeezing into the playoff Michigan's got a much better situation right now than Notre Dame does. I don't know if it had a much better situation 48 hours ago, but now it does. And, they're able to use that. And until Notre Dame tabs its coach, Michigan has this advantage. It's similar to the advantage they have with Ohio State. I don't know right now if it's not definitive that Michigan's going to beat Ohio State again. All right. We don't know when we don't know if they're going to win it again next year. We don't know if they're going to win it again the year after that. We have no idea. So for the next 360 whatever days it is, they're going to use that to their full advantage because they know that's all they have to do it. So I think between now and when Notre Dame makes its hire, Michigan should do the same thing. Press as much gas as possible. And I trust that if, this is a staff, again, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat things. There have been staff members in the past who have not been good at recruiting or have not put a ton of effort into recruiting. I can assure you that this staff puts a lot of effort into that plan. This team isn't as successful as it is right now because these coaches aren't good. They're successful because it's a much better culture than it has been in the past. So I think now more than ever, you're seeing Michigan develop at a high level and recruit at a high level and match it up with kids who fit its script. So I think if there's a kid out there with Notre Dame offer or with a Notre Dame commitment in the 22 class or 20, whatever it is, they're going to ring them if they feel that they can make that fit work still. It's just that simple. And they have a window to do it where they have a, huge upper hand. And again, so does every school. So it's not like it's just going to automatically be Michigan. But that's really all I have on it. It's just if they haven't signed, then yeah, absolutely.
Well, Tanner, I'm hoping for a lot of things when it comes to the college football playoff. One is just Michigan getting in there. The other one is, maybe Georgia taking Alabama out to the woodshed. So you there's no way that you could keep them in the 4. And then, it wouldn't be crazy to think Oklahoma State, Notre Dame. And if you're the selection committee, you know that they're just looking for the best matchups or the biggest matchups. How about a little Michigan Notre Dame 2-3 matchup there?
I think
I'd like to see that, Tanner.
Well, so I grew up in Indiana from a Catholic family. I have a lot of disdain for Notre Dame, although you can't see it, but I got a picture up there of my grandpa and I'm into Michigan stuff and he's in Notre Dame stuff. So always go back and forth. But I would love to. I just don't think with their criteria that they're going to be able to select a team that is coachless, right? I mean, that's, that factors in, right? And
I don't know.
So that's part of their criteria. And they mentioned that in the show tonight, I believe that, if a coach or a player is not available for the final rankings, that will factor in. So, unless there's just chaos, I don't know if Notre Dame's going to come in. I think probably my guess to what's going to happen is you're going to have Georgia beat Bama. Bama shouldn't be in at 2 losses, best win over Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a good team, but I just don't know Alabama's done enough this year to show that they deserve to be in unless you give them a Lifetime Achievement Award. Michigan 2, if they beat Iowa, and then 3-4, Cincy, Oklahoma State. That's kind of where I see it. I don't know how they'll rank it. My fiance graduated from the University of Cincinnati this past May, so it might be a fun one for Michigan and Cincinnati facing off. But that's kind of how I see it playing out. And, I just don't think the committee in good faith can put Notre Dame in without a coach.
Yeah, good faith.
Well, pun.
Matchups. I'll tell you what, if Georgia and Alabama play a really good game, I could easily see them saying, hey, let's just play those guys again. And
they would not. Oh man, if they did that, they would.
They like ratings, and but I don't think that they can throw Notre Dame in over Cincinnati, since actually Cincinnati beat Notre Dame by double figures. That'll make them look ridiculous. But I mean,
don't tell that to David Pollock. He might have a hissy fit again on TV. So
what did he do? Because I didn't even watch that.
Yeah, he said if they were talking about hypotheticals, and if Michigan lost to Iowa, they were talking about Ohio State getting in, and he was like, well, you could put Ohio State over Michigan because head-to-head doesn't matter. And then Kirk Herbstreit's like, do you want to put Michigan State over Michigan right now? So, yeah, he's just being his normal, usual disliking Michigan self, which is fine.
It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It's been like 3 or 4 weeks of that.
Southern bias.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
Bias.
I mean, look, David Pollock can say a million things. At the end of the day, Michigan's number 2. They're gonna win. If they win on Saturday and they go to the college football playoff, then like whatever. David Pollock is just a pawn.
Wouldn't it be great if Michigan matched up with the Georgia Bulldogs, number 1 and number 2, and they took it to that all-world defense? I mean, I don't think that would happen, but that would be some nice crow for
the conversation for another day.
Hey, give me to the championship game. You know, if Michigan can win 13 games this year, Scott Frost has won 15 in 4 years at Nebraska. So, you know, that's a stat for you.
I'll take a championship game ticket right now. I like how Michigan controls their own destiny. There's no way that Michigan's going to win and they're going to be left out. You know, it doesn't matter what Pollock or.
We don't have to root for wild scenarios like we did in 2016. I guess 2018, it was kind of like, no, we just, Michigan got thrashed. There's no way. But 2016, you're kind of holding out hope maybe. It's really nice to be on the other side of that for once.
What game was that? That was at Colorado versus I remember watching it. It was a Pac-12 championship. It was Colorado versus somebody, and I think Colorado had to win.
Yeah, Michigan needed Colorado to win because they had beat Colorado, so it would have been a good win. And then Michigan needed they needed everything to go wrong, and it did not, obviously. But much more fun on this side of just getting ready. Although the anxiety and the nerves that come with it, but getting ready for a Big Ten championship rather than we need X, Y, and Z to happen to see Michigan make the playoffs.
It's kind of crazy to think about this. And I'm trying to eventually put it into words, and everything's been absolutely chaotic since Saturday. I mean, I haven't stopped looking at my phone and being on my phone and taking calls and making texts, and it's been chaotic. It's been fun, but it's definitely been like a, hey, this is your job again type of week. And I've enjoyed it, but I haven't been able to sit down and write what I want to write, which is how monumental the next couple weeks are for Michigan's success on the season. Goes without saying, but think about how well Michigan's been able to recruit in the early days of Harbaugh. And then you think about the last few years, and it's interesting because the first couple of years, Michigan was recruiting like one of the 5 best recruiting schools in the country, right? And then they lose the JT Barrett game. They don't have the season they wanted to have in 2017. And then you saw Michigan's, the 2018 class after that 2017 season, they had to start recruiting like they were a lesser. They kind of dropped a tier in how they were recruiting. And some you could say that they were recruiting like fit, and all of that, which is, partly true. I don't want to take anything away from that, but you can tell just in the level of prospects Michigan was getting in 2016 and even 2017, like the DPJs and the Tariq Blacks in 17 and the Aubrey Solomons and all of that. And then you start to look at their 18, 19, and 20 classes, which were a lot different in my opinion, especially the 18 class, which turned out to be a really excellent one. That's the class that's, leading you to a Big Ten championship right now. So I would hope that it worked out. But you think about it, they've recruited extremely well when they're not recruiting like they're one of the 5 best. And they're developing because of it. They're succeeding because they're developing like madmen, in comparison to the past. Now, combine those two things, and you have this opportunity for Michigan to be real good at what it does, because not only are they now going to be able to go back to that crop of top 5, talent pool recruiting because they have the success to back it, or if they make this run, they have that to back it. But they're also going to still have those traits where they're able to develop the kids that they bring in traditionally like they have in the past couple of years. So it's really one of those things where these next couple of weeks and I don't know if it turns out, I don't even know what day the national championship or semifinal is. Don't even ask, but whenever it comes, what was that?
New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve? Okay. Well, whenever that comes, the next month or so is going to be really interesting because if Michigan's able to make this run, yes, by all means, it's far more important for this year's team and all that. And I'll leave that to the team guys to talk about. But as far as recruiting goes, like you could not draw up a more monumental situation in college football because Michigan is kind of like disrupting the market in a way because Clemson's down, Oklahoma's down. USC is going to get a little hot streak here with Lincoln Riley being back. But Alabama hasn't had as good of a year. Michigan's got this like insane opportunity to use everything it's done this year and catapult it into an awesome 2023 class. They've already got headway on Dante Moore. You think about all these other kids that they're going to go after in 20. They've already got Starlings, who's legitimately could end up being a top 100 guy. So it's really something that's intriguing me because you don't see that. That's going to be like a 5. That's going to be like Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan in recruiting if they're able to kind of make this run.
Well, and I think too, I have 2 points to make. I think so. First one is, yes, they're going to have more access to the higher rated guys again, but some of the names you mentioned, Trig Black, Aubrey Solomon, like there needs to be a balance of fit to talent. And that's what's been so special about this team because you mentioned 2018. Think about the guys that were in that class. That offseason, people were complaining and moaning because there was no top 100 guys. And there's Aiden Hutchinson, Hassan Haskins, Jake Moody, right? Ronnie Bell, like all these guys in that class that turned out to be great culture fits, great, scheme fits as well for what Michigan wanted to do ultimately this year. So there needs to be a balance of talent, but the right fit. And I think, I don't know, in the first couple of years, it was just like Michigan got a lot of really talented guys. It didn't, it worked against everybody but Ohio State. So maybe that's just kind of the, that makes it look worse than it was. But, these past few classes, they've got guys that are fit. You talked about Rod Moore. How much do you think he wanted to beat Ohio State? An Ohio kid who grew up in the state of Ohio from a very highly recruited area, didn't get a sniff from Ohio State, right? Like, I think that stuff matters. So finding the right balance of talent and culture fit is super important. And I hope that Michigan can kind of find that and strike that. The second point I want to make is if you're an offensive lineman, a defensive end, a running back, even corner, how do you watch that game and say, nah? Because they were dominant on the offensive line. Hassan Haskins played a great game. I think you can see the changes that have come from Mike Hart being the running back coach. I didn't think it would be that big of a jump, honestly. Like I thought, I love Mike Hart. I thought it was more of a rah-rah kind of move, and I thought he was a good coach. But, I didn't play running back ever. Like, I don't know what all it takes. And I mean, the running backs this year were so much better than last year. So, if you're running back, you want to play behind a stud offensive line, right? This potentially has 4 or 5 NFL draft picks, depending on Vistardis, and they did that 2 years ago as well. And, you looked at the way Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo played. I mean, that speaks for itself. 4 sacks, we're wreaking havoc all over the field. But then Vincent Gray and DJ Turner, right? Not super highly recruited guys, held their own against, the best receiving core in the last 20 years, maybe. I don't know. I mean, those guys are really, really, really good, and they're all going to be first-round draft picks. And every time you turn around, they were making plays, but they had to make plays over guys that were in great position. So I thought the way Michigan won, obviously they rolled them, but just the way that the certain position groups played has got to be really appealing moving forward.
Yeah, I would also, Brandon and Tanner, give a shout-out to Sharon Moore.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know he's been talking about
a stud.
On the recruiting trail, a stud. I wasn't sure what he was going to bring. I know he was an offensive lineman himself, but looking at just how the offensive line played and how they came together, that was awesome. I think also, Clinksdale, he didn't have a spring. Maybe they sent a fruit basket out to Buffalo to Lindquist, whatever he was doing. But those guys all developed, man, and played with confidence. And I don't know, technique-wise and looking at them, man, they look like they look sharp, and they look like they were well coached. I mean, what else can you say? Like, they went against these great wide receivers, and I don't know that they hung in there. These guys made remarkable catches. To think about the ones that they were, but the one, like, behind that, never a catch like that before. I don't even know if it was a catch.
Yeah, I mean, and you go back to the point from earlier that Tanner made about taking guys that are, kind of like flyers or whatever you want to call it. Vincent Gray's another one of them. Brad Hawkins, not really a flyer. Michigan was on him kind of for a while, but he's a guy who you led with prep school, and he ends up being a 2-year starter and a captain and all that for the defense. So, yeah, it's interesting to think about. We're listing off these guys, and, it's just one of those things where I think the number one most impressive unit and the one that's probably going to have the most to sell on the recruiting trail is the offensive line. It's been extraordinary. I mean, I respect the heck out of Nick Baumgartner and everything that he does, and he's saying this is the best offensive line in the country. And I think that you can't find one quite better or one convincingly better if there is one. I think this is one of the only units in the country fit to handle, and I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but fit to handle Georgia's defensive line, if at all, right? So I think it's one of those things where, like the units have been awesome, and they've been playing so much better than they played. It's not that hard to play better than 2 and 4, but you talk about going from 2 and 4 to 11 and 1. Every unit's got to play better at that point. But the offensive line has been like a national renowned unit. And what they did to Ohio State on film is just – I was talking to just one of my buddies today who happens to be a big Michigan fan, and I was talking to him about how do you scheme against what Michigan did offensively to Ohio State? Like, oh, we'll just load the box. I'm like, okay. Like, there was a point in time when Ohio State was doing that, and it got schemed back. It's like they just out-physicaled them. They wanted it more. They were grittier inside the trenches, and they literally outplayed them. Like, and it's hard to, I mean, I don't know. Tanner is probably a much better source for this information than I am. So I'll swing it to him, but it's just interesting. Like when you're watching a game like that, if you're a recruit, you're like, holy cow, these guys are going to war for this staff, and they're going to war in the trenches, and they're dominating because of it.
Well, I'll tell you, man, I played offensive line, and I'm not going to give my backstory. I didn't play in college. I had some looks and offers, but decided to be a student and get into the working force. Just thinking about when you have a bully that in a team that you can't get over that hump, and when you kind of decide that they're not going to bully us anymore, we're going to bully them. And I've been a part of a team where, we just got our tails kicked. And one year we just said no more. This was our senior year, went out, smashed him in the mouth. That's what Michigan did. And obviously not the same stage or anything, but I just know what those guys feel. And, I'll tell you in the second quarter, I turned to my uncle, I was watching it with him, and I said, man, Michigan is the better team. Like Michigan is playing better. They're just in it more than Ohio State was. Ohio State was, at some points looked like they were going through the motions, right? I mean, that defensive line, you had Zach Harrison, 5-star, Teron Vincent, 5-star, right? You have all these studs for Ohio State, and they're nowhere to be found. If I didn't follow recruiting and keep up as close as I do, I would have no idea who any of the front 7 members of Ohio State were, because Michigan's offensive line equalized them and put them in the ground. And yeah, you're right, Brandon. I mean, you watch that. They're having so much fun. And when you're an offensive lineman, you just want to run block. You just want to get after guys. You want to get pancakes. And I saw it all day. There were Buckeyes on their back all game long. And that is a lot of fun, for the guys playing, but also recruits imagining themselves in the offense. Like, yeah, I want to run block. Like, yeah, obviously you got to pass pro to get to the NFL, but run blocking is the fun stuff. And I think Michigan put it on display. And, obviously you run for 300 yards on Ohio State. It's going to put everyone on notice.
Yeah, going for 7 yards a crack, and you don't even have to know that much about offensive line where you look, and it's like you could see the movement. You could see the backs hitting the line of scrimmage, and they're at full speed before they even get to the second level there. And some of those offensive linemen, whatever, they're pulling, they're getting out to the linebackers, and they're smashing them there, like that 55-yard run for Corum. I mean, you got so many times these inside guys. They're I don't know where they're going to end up going in the draft. Well, you start seeing Keegan and Zinter and Vistardis, the way he could move. He looked like a pro. Those guys all look like pros on that offensive line. It was really spectacular. And you know what? That's going to help out your pass game a little bit when you're finally you run it 10 times in a row and then you look for a little play action. It's going to help you. Well,
I want to make a point real quick. I just want to jump in on that 55-yard run from Corum. If you go back and watch Vistardis reach block, a thing of beauty. I mean, he seals it off perfectly, and Corum is just like, I mean, that hole is so open that, even bum ankle and all, he's able to break it. So that was a thing of beauty on that play.
Brandon, I want to ask you, both you guys can chime in here. Over the 2 weeks, is there a name specifically where you're looking to? Is Michigan sitting back? It wouldn't be a surprise if there's a flip. We're also waiting for that second phase where you get the second signing day. Are they being choosy? I mean, how do you think they go about it? Is there somebody eminent that you would look at and put in the crosshairs here?
I mean, they definitely want to wrap up with Josh Connerly, the tackle out of Washington. He's somebody that they like quite a bit. And then you have Goodwin, who came in for a trip. He's committed right now to help me out, Tanner. Where's
Kentucky.
Kentucky. I thought it was Kentucky. I knew he's from Louisville. I just couldn't think if he was committed to Kentucky or not. But Goodwin's, a big one. And I don't know if they're trying to take Goodwin and Connerly or if they're trying to land one in case they don't land the other. Because neither is a sure thing. I think Connerly with the USC hire of Lincoln Riley is starting to get a little bit interesting. And I know him being from Washington, it seemed like he was going to go to UW until that whole mess came about. So, it kind of depends on what happens there. But I think, Connerly.
Mark Stoops could be going to Oklahoma.
Ah, jeez. Yeah.
Well, I think he re-upped.
He said today. He said today he's going to stay with Kentucky, but we know how much that means over the past couple of days. But maybe he'll be the coach of Notre Dame instead. So anyway, yeah, I mean, Connerly and Goodwin are two guys they're definitely trying to wrap up. The Damani Jackson is still there, and they're still pursuing that. Just get this out of the way. I don't think they're going to land him inevitably. And then, there's a few other guys on the board that they still want to land in this class. Ethan Burke's a guy they still want to get. He's another one of those projective type defensive ends, those edge players that Michigan loves to bring in at like the 220, 230 and then turn into a beast. And he's 6'7", 220. So he was already talking about how they want to turn him into like a 250, 260, 270 type of guy. So there's another case of their, development project. They're still recruiting to develop, right? And seeing, okay, what has worked for us before, it's going to work now. And they're able to use the body types of like the Hutches and the Ojabos and the Quiddipays and the, Josh Uches and everything, right? To look for their next guys. So yeah, there's still some guys they're looking at from the 22 class. There's still plenty more too. I think that they could obviously Zeke Berry, the corner out of, De La Salle in Concord, California. Josh and I put our future cast in for that. He's committing on Friday, so we'll see what happens there. The future casts are in. We'll see what the announcement is. So yeah, there's still plenty of guys they're looking at. And I think Zeke Berry's the corner they're going to get. I don't see them getting Damani. So I think that's who they wrap up with along with Will Johnson. And there's some other DBs in here. That's
a great DB class too, with or without Damani. I mean, that's elite still.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke Berry's probably going to be a safety at the next level, but he can, it's one of those things where people were ripping on the boards about how he's like for sure a safety. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I think that's what he's being recruited as, but like we've seen crazier things happen with position changes, right? I mean, corner and safety is about as seamless as it gets, maybe not in the middle of a game, but like from year to year, and it can happen. So I love Michigan's DB class. I think that it's got a pinnacle in Will Johnson. I mean, he was wanted by everyone. So the fact they kept him here was monstrous. That was before we came along. So we weren't really a part of that whole situation, but I can guarantee you, I used to coach at South. So just being around him and around people who know him, like he's everything you want and more, not just on the field, but off of it as well. So yeah, it's a pretty awesome DB class, but that's pretty much what they're looking for to round out this 22. And I think they're going to do good. I think they're going to get who they want to get. I just don't think that they're going to win the Damani sweepstakes, which is kind of like I said in our first show, Dennis, like Damani was an accessory and a huge compliment to what they already had in Will Johnson. To get both of them would have been arguably generational, right? Like they had that ceiling to be generational here together, and it stinks to not get both of them. But I mean, hardly any school is getting two corners that good. I mean, by hardly, I mean like there's probably none. If any, I think it's Georgia. I think they have a super good cornerback class right now, but look what they're doing. I mean, be hard to not recruit defense from there. I think I could send my grandma down to Athens and recruit some DBs for them. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that's probably what I see happening with 22. I don't know if Tanner has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, Miles Pollard's a stud, I think. I think he's a kid who in year 2 or 3 really hits the scene, or hits the ground running, I should say. And also Keon Sabb, right? I mean, I don't know, right, you have a better read on that one, but Brett Venables has been thrown around for the Oklahoma job. So who knows what's going on there? And obviously they've had a down year, although 9-3, and the sky is falling in Clemson, South Carolina. Must be rough, but still a potential to get Keon Sabb. Although I think he probably projects more to like a hybrid space player, maybe more of a Sam linebacker with his frame. But yeah, I mean, an elite DB class that they're bringing in, and that might be the best position group in this class, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And I mean, we really like Graham. Off the edge. I think he's a kid who can be a difference maker. But specific to DBs, I mean, that's the thing, is what's going to cloud over this DB class is that it didn't get Damani, because it's kind of similar, and we're going to cross topics here. It's kind of similar to how everyone's upset that the Tigers signed Baez because they didn't get Correa. Well, the difference isn't in that they signed Baez instead of Correa. It's that they got Baez instead of Zach Short, right? So think about it that way, is Michigan didn't get Damani, but look how much they got in the defensive back class, right? Or they might not get Damani. I don't think they're going to get him. They might, inevitably. To be honest with you, I've got probably one link of communication with that in the past couple of days. I'm fine admitting that, whatever. That doesn't bother me. Like I'm not going to sit here and act like I know what's going on with that. I just know that it hasn't been very positive on one side that I know of. So, and I think that if inevitably he doesn't choose Michigan, that it's going to get clouded over a pretty good DB class. And by pretty good, I mean probably one of the nation's best outside of Georgia. And it can probably compare to most other ones.
Yeah, well, I hope he enjoys Georgia rubbing the Tide's nose in it this weekend while Michigan's doing the same thing to Iowa. And then he can be like, yeah, I'm going to Alabama. Hopefully he commits before then.
Might not be Bama.
Woo, there you go. I like that. All right, any final thoughts here?
Are you saying Tuck's coming? Is that what you're saying, Brandon?
Oh, God, I don't know about that. And Coach of the Year, though, he deserves it. I mean, he took a team that pretty much never played together before the year and did some pretty special things, so I'll give it to him. I've got no problem with that.
I have heading into this championship week, I have my Heisman ballot in front of me. I have Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle from Georgia, number 1 right now on my list. I have Aiden Hutchinson, number 2, and I have Bryce Young, 3. Now I got Walker and Stroud 4 or 5, but Walker and Stroud aren't playing this weekend. The other 3 are. So if Bryce Young goes out there and plays great against Georgia and they beat him, I could see putting him at number 1. I think if Aiden Hutchinson goes out, plays like he has the last 2 weeks, has another 3-sack game, I could easily put him in and have him win it. If Jordan Davis goes and slams the door on the Tide, the running backs and everything else, I think big number 99 could be the Heisman Trophy winner. At least that's how I would vote it. You guys see any way that it happens like that? Anybody else that you'd put into the mix, or do you like that top 5 that I have?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're good with that top 5. I think that Hutch has the best opportunity. Well, actually, I'd probably say Davis, because Alabama's offensive line is not good, which is shocking to say out loud. But it's a complete fact that Michigan's offensive line is worlds better than Alabama's, at least in how it's performed. So Jordan Davis might have the best opportunity this weekend, but I would have to say Hutch, because Iowa's sacks allowed rate is 98th in the country or something like that. So here's the thing. I'll say that, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be on a podcast again throughout this week, so I'm just going to get this out of the way. On paper, Michigan should just run through Iowa on Saturday. And if it was just a casual game coming off any game before it, then I'd be 100%. Michigan's defensive line is going to eat alive their offensive line in the pass game. I think Iowa's going to have some success on the ground, but in the pass game, it's not going to be able to do anything. It hasn't been able to do anything really all year against far lesser defenses. So it's definitely it definitely should be even worse against Michigan's. And then Michigan's offense, after putting everything they put on film last week against Ohio State, who knows? They might come out and do what they did against Maryland, which was almost the complete opposite of what they did to Ohio State. So it's kind of funny seeing this staff kind of toy with its film and put things on there to throw their teams off. You saw that with the Statue of Liberty on the first drive, right? With Donovan Edwards out there as the decoy. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens, because on paper, yes, Hutch should have 10 sacks this weekend. And 90, or Michigan as a whole, so 98th in sacks allowed. I don't know what Ohio State was, but it certainly wasn't that, right? Because all we heard about all week was how good Ohio State's tackle play was. They were eating turf all day on Saturday. So who knows what Iowa's going to be doing on Saturday. But again, letdown spot. You're off of the most emotional Michigan victory in a decade, literally. So who knows how much that affects Saturday.
I would let the negative Michigan thoughts come into mind, and it did happen earlier this week. I was like, man, now they got to play a Big Ten championship game and they've got to go beat Iowa. I just think there's too much senior leadership. I just don't think a guy like Hassan Haskins or Aiden Hutchinson is going to let a letdown happen. Yeah. I will say I wish I didn't see so much Ohio State post-game talk, videos on YouTube popping up today. I'm all right, guys, can we get on to Iowa? But no, I think you mentioned the sack rate. I think they're dead last in the Big Ten in sacks allowed, behind Penn State, who Michigan abused to the tune of 7 sacks a couple weeks ago. I think Petrus is a statue, and he's hurt, right? That's why they've been flipping it, flip-flopping on quarterbacks, is because Petrus has been banged up. So, Linderbaum's a stud center for them, probably a first or second day pick next year. At the center position, he's a beast. But so Smith and Hinton are going to need to hold up like they did against Ohio State. But I think Hutch is a guy who's got his mind set on one thing, and that's taking Michigan as far as he can, right? And the same thing can be said about Hassan Haskins, the offensive line, Cade McNamara, all these guys. I just feel, you mentioned earlier the culture. Like there's just this leadership, and not to say that Michigan teams in the past didn't have good leadership. I just don't think it's on this level. So as far as the Heisman goes, man, Aiden almost had a Heisman moment. If he could have one-handed picked that ball off on 4th and 4 that went to Henderson for a touchdown, I mean, and maybe housed it, I don't know. That would have been maybe a Heisman sealer, maybe strike a pose too in the end zone. But no, I think if he has 2, sacks, maybe a forced fumble, maybe he had a touchdown this season. I don't know. I don't know where he would have gotten one of those taken off the board. But, I think if there's any year to do it, I think it's this year, because Bryce Young got all the talent in the world, right? And they may not even make the playoff, right? So obviously they need to win for him to have a chance. But, can you give it to CJ Stroud after kind of, putting up a quiet 400 yards? I mean, it was 400 yards, but it didn't really move the needle much. Can you give it to Kenneth Walker, who struggled big time against Ohio State? I know he was hurt a little bit, but he's kind of tapered off towards the end of the year. So, I think Hutch or the dude from Georgia, Davis. I mean, if there's any year to vote a defensive player, it's this year. It should have been Sue back in 2009. But, if there's any year to kind of buck that trend and give it to the truly the most outstanding player in college football, which should be Aiden Hutchinson, in my opinion. I'm biased, but it doesn't need to be a quarterback or a running back every single year, right? Like last year, Devontae Smith, fantastic see a receiver win it. Maybe let's kind of get to a defensive lineman to maybe get their name etched on it.
All right. You know what? If this sounds weird, if Michigan played Ohio State in the middle of the year and they were playing Iowa in just a regular season game, I think the letdown factor would be there. But with a championship on the line, college football playoffs, that leadership that you talked about, I don't think that's going to be an issue. And, one thing about Iowa, they were all the way to number 2, but, they didn't play Michigan State. They didn't play Ohio State. They didn't play Michigan. So, they missed a lot of big teams there. I know they're number 1 in defensive efficiency, but that matchup, and Goodson's he's a heck of a back. Tyler Goodson. I like him, but their safety is all right too. But and you mentioned their center. I think Michigan takes care of business.
I did too.
Yeah. I don't know if they're going to cover, but I think they'll take care of business.
I think they cover. I think they score. I think they win by 2 scores. Actually, I just think they're in this. I think they're locked in. I think I saw somebody say they're going to overlook Iowa.
Dennis is like, say that again.
No, I do think they're win by 2 scores.
Cover 2. I'm picking them to cover 2.
I think Penn State would have rolled them if Sean Clifford didn't get hurt. So, and you look at their offensive output against Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Purdue. I mean, Purdue held them to 7 points. I mean, so this is a team that is really kind of limped to the finish line. I mean, I live in Omaha. The collapse against that Nebraska had against Iowa. I mean, Nebraska was dominating that game with a backup quarterback, and we all know Nebraska's struggles in close games. But I mean, they were up 21-6 heading into the fourth quarter, or maybe it was late third quarter. So I just think Michigan has too many athletes. Get them out in space. Game plan, build off what you did against Ohio State and Maryland, and I think they can run away with it by a couple touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Michigan's 10-2 against the spread. Literally the best team against the spread in the country. I think if they might be tied, but I know they're at the top, which is crazy because they used to be the worst cover machine ever a few years ago. They were kind of like a meme for not covering among circles.
Now they're win outright.
Now there's that. But even as favorites, they're covering like no tomorrow. Currently, I can tell you that at this point last week, the line had already started to show some signals one way, and it was towards Michigan. And then we saw it go down to 6.5. I think it was at 9.5 or 10 at some point last week, and then it ended up getting to 6.5. And this line hasn't moved. It's Tuesday though, so we'll see what happens Wednesday or Thursday. It went from 11. It got up to 11, and it's down to 10.5, but it's pretty much stayed at 10.5. There hasn't been a whole lot of action on it though, so obviously I'll keep everything posted in the Wolverine Den. But But yeah, there's
that is sharpening the edge on who got next. That's talk about crossing up. I like it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. With all these picks, we might need a show for the sharpening the edge. I don't know I'm hot.
Sharpening.
I'm winning these guys money. Need some comments or something.
22 college football sharpening the edge. I'm there. I have to get a sponsor. I get us a sponsor for it. All right. Brandon Justice, great job recruiting editor. Tanner Wooten, recruiting analyst, writer for the Maize and Blue Review. Thanks so much. Great job, guys. I look forward to talking with you guys again. Doing it all again.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it, gentlemen.
All right. See ya.